The May 10th, 2023 meeting of the local planning agency of the City of Dunedin will now come to order. The local planning agency is an advisory board of citizens appointed by the City Commission. This board is comprised of volunteers who represent the thoughts and the concerns of the community. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to make recommendations to the City Commission regarding each item on the agenda. Tonight, we will be conducting public hearings. Therefore, this meeting is open to the public. Anyone in the audience who wishes to give testimony to any of these items on the agenda will need to be sworn in by the Deputy City Clerk. And this swearing-in process will occur after tonight's first agenda item, which will be the approval of the minutes from the last LPA meeting. Please be aware that the local planning agency is not a quasi-judicial board and therefore has no final decision-making power. Our procedures, however, are structured in a quasi-judicial manner for the benefit of those who come before it. Tonight's format will be as follows. I will introduce each item on the agenda, after which the city representative will present information about it. Thereafter, the members of the local planning agency will respond to the city representative. Finally, anyone from the public may come forward. Those from the public wishing to give testimony will need to approach the dais, identify themselves, and then utilize the speaker's lectern in order for their concerns to be recorded. Upon the conclusion of the public hearing, the local planning agency will consider the evidence before it and will vote on the agenda item. That voice vote is the rendition of the order of the board, and there will be no written decision issued by the board. The first item on tonight's agenda is the approval of the minutes from the December 14th, 2022 LPA meeting. Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions to the minutes? I'm sure you all read them.
I did.
Of course.
Okay. I'll hear a motion to accept them.
I wasn't here. Does it make any difference?
I'm sorry?
I wasn't there at that meeting, but I've read them, and I'm ready to make a motion to accept them as read.
We have a motion for acceptance of the minutes. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion to accept the minutes and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the motion passes. The Deputy City Clerk will now swear in all persons wishing to speak or give testimony on any of tonight's agenda items.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you are about to give in this proceeding is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next item on the agenda is the annual selection of the chair and vice chair of the local planning agency. I would make a recommendation to postpone this item on the agenda at this time, and for the only reason is that we have two of our permanent members on the board that are absent tonight. And of course, we have our alternates sitting in for them, and that's the purpose of their work. But in fairness to the two that are not here, and I'm just one person here, we can vote on this and y'all can decide if you want to proceed or not. But for the sake of the two members, the full members that are not here, I would suggest that we postpone this until the next meeting. Any conversation?
It's been 4 or 5 months since we had a chair, though. So I don't know why we want to kick the can down the road any further.
Well,
I understand what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
know specifically, over the last few years, we've had alternates up here and then voted on some tough things. I can go with it either way, but it's been 6 months since we met. Did you have some, sorry, kind of cut in front of
No,
you?
I was just, no, you're fine. I just, just so we could, if there's a motion and a second, and then you discuss, and then you would vote on that. So if you just, if you want to proceed that way, you've decided to discuss, it's fine, but.
Can we continue with the discussion prior to
Sure, of
making a
course,
motion?
Yeah. There just need to be a motion if
Ma-
you're going to move forward that
Michael,
way.
would you like to?
Really
have a-
doesn't matter.
and,
Tonight or next month? Well, there is the consideration, will we meet next month?
That's what I was thinking.
So
We do have a meeting.
Do we have any?
So there are items already on an agenda for June, okay.
Is there a motion to either accept this or move forward with this on the menu?
Does the clerk have any recommendations?
It's truly up to you all as a board, whether you want to postpone or proceed.
And
And we just need to make a motion for either or.
Okay.
Right, did you say we were going to meet in June? Yes, sir. Oh, okay.
so, I mean, I just brought it up in fairness to the two other full board members that are not here.
Okay, I'd like to ask a question about the two other board members. Are they first-time board members like myself, or are they people that have been here
They
previous?
They have been here before.
Okay.
And that's the only reason why.
And is it Mr. Walensky and Mr. Roberts?
It would be Roberts and
James Roberts,
Hutchins.
okay, and Steve Hutchins, and they both
And they've
are
both
on the
been
board.
long-term members. I'll make the motion that we
Postpone?
postpone until our next date certain, that we do have a meeting next month.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, and the motion passes. Okay, before we go on to the third item or on the agenda, I need to ask staff a question that relates to the minutes. So before we go too far away from the minutes, I just need to ask a question. And I'm going to kind of read down my notes here. In the meeting minutes of December 12th, 2022, during the discussion of the selection of new board members, Mr. Kenny advised a orientation program for all new approved board members. I'm not sure if we have moved forward with this, so let me finish, and then I do want to hear from you, George, okay? So last month, I did reach out to the staff, both George and Joe, okay? And I made a request that we schedule sometime on our future agendas, and specifically for the next meeting, that we ask Bob Ironsmith to make a presentation to our board as an agenda item, just to give us an understanding of what the CRA is, the area that it covers, and a lot of the very important zoning modifications that have been made within the CRA district. So I think this is an extremely important topic of conversation. And I understand that Mr. Ironsmith has agreed to make this presentation, so at our meeting in June, we will have Bob here to kind of give us hopefully a thorough review and help us understand a little bit more about the CRA district. I also believe that these meetings that we have are a great opportunity, George, for us to seize the board's time, and maybe when we have a light agenda, put something else on the agenda that could be, relate to, things like understanding compatibility, okay, where, and we wrestle with that one all the time, and finally we've got some guidelines for compatibility, and I think that would be a good topic of conversation that we, should have, so that our board members can hopefully all understand that. Sunshine Law, and maybe our, attorney here, she attends all of our meetings, maybe she could, give us a very brief sunshine requirement, because we deal with it as we're out in public and meeting one another too. So it's very important. There is some liability if we have an issue about, there are fines, I guess, that are supposedly involved. But that is kind of what I wanted to say before we got off all of the minute issues. So did we move forward with any direction at all to our new members?
Yes, Chairman Cervo, members of the board, thank you. Yes, so we talked about that orientation program. We have started that process, and I think maybe 2 of the board members up there, or 3 have already been through it. We do include in that orientation some of the things that you just mentioned, including an overview of the sunshine provisions and a quick peek at the compatibility provisions that we have through our comprehensive plan, as you know, but certainly happy to bring those back and talk about those a little bit more fully if we have a light agenda, if that's something that the board's interested in. We do want to reach back out to the existing board members, and I think Dr. Broom, we had you scheduled and something happened and we had to reschedule you, but we want to also reach back out to the existing board members to see if they'd like to come in and kind of walk through that orientation program as well. We're happy to do that.
This was just a suggestion on my part. I'm going to leave this up to you, staff, Joey. If you find that this is a good idea to do, to utilize our time, we are here. So maybe a 15 or 20 minute.
Yeah. One other thing I'll just mention for the board's consideration too, as you probably know, last year in our business plan initiative, through our budget process, our department was awarded a substantial sum of money to rewrite the land development code. So when that obviously happens, this board will be a critical element to the process, to the review, to the coordination, to the outreach. So there will be, I suspect, moving forward pretty quickly, some pretty full agendas going forward with the work that we anticipate the Planning Commission will be involved in.
I'm hearing a rumor that the board then is going to have to provide some kind of documents about our involvement with land and properties and dealings. I understand that that's going to be a little bit more thorough than the one that we normally do sign every year.
Yeah, I would defer to Nicole. She's kind of our legislative liaison and expert. I know she was talking about some legislation that was pending. I don't know if that's gone through or not.
Okay, either do I, but I've heard about that legislation, so. Okay, so that could all impact us, okay?
Yeah. Could I?
Yes.
That's the financial disclosure we're talking about. That's usually in July that comes out, correct? And we all have to do a financial disclosure.
To the county clerk.
It's to the county,
Yeah.
That is your Form F1.
F1, yeah.
But we believe legislatively it may have evolved into something that basically the county commissioners and people that sit on the county boards are required to do, which is different from what we've done for years.
I know they are in the process of making all of that electronic, so there is some revamping going on.
Okay.
I don't know enough about it, but we can get some information on that.
Well, I guess as it happens, we'll be told. I've got one other item before we get into the agenda item here, and I just want to go over the board if I can do that. Is there any issue with me trying to kind of recap where we're all at?
In what regard, Chairperson?
Just identifying, number one, that the commission did approve all of our new members and the alternates.
The
You know,
membership.
I didn't know that until yesterday, until I sent an email to the,
No, I just was wondering on what topic. So you're just talking about
No, just
who
purely-
constitutes the board and the
I
membership?
just want to
Sure, of
recap
course.
the board people, and is that okay?
Yes.
Any issue?
No, sir, some introductions are certainly in order.
Thank you. Okay. So the full board this term, and we have existing to return, Steve, and Steve will be in his final term, which ends this November. Dan will end my term also at the end of December. So you two alternates, if the commission approves, come January 1, it may be your time, okay? So Jim Roberts, who is presently not here, is a full board member. He still has a term or two or term and a half. Michael Bloom, a full board member, and he still has a term or two. Steve Hutchins is a prior alternate and a new board member. Charles Flatley, new board member, and also Deborah Kynes. Okay, so that is our board with the two alternates, Kevin and Elizabeth. And since the commission did approve you all, I want to welcome you to the board, and thank you for taking the interest to be part of this, okay? And welcome you tonight. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Any conversation? Okay. All right. So the third item on our agenda tonight is Ordinance 23-05. Has anyone on the board had any ex parte communication regarding this application or ordinance? If so, please reveal. Has anyone had any contact with this agenda item?
No.
Okay. All right. At this time, Joe, you're on. Thank you.
Well, good evening. I'm Joseph DePasqua, representing our Community Development Department, and I'd like to just do a brief overview of Ordinance 2305 for you, talking a little bit about the background and some of what, really the meat of what the ordinance itself and the accompanying development agreement amendment entails. I believe we have a representative of the hotel here this evening as well. So this is the third amended Fenway Hotel Development Agreement for the Fenway Hotel project, most of you know, on Edgewater Drive, specifically 453 Edgewater Drive. From a past action standpoint, there's been quite a bit that's gone on. This project goes back several years. Briefly, in March of 2015, the City Commission adopted Ordinance 1506, and that authorized the initial the execution of the initial Fenway Hotel Development Agreement. That executed agreement was ultimately recorded in Pinellas County Records in April of 2015. It was included with the staffing for tonight's item. A couple years later, the City Commission adopted, this was in June of 2017, Ordinance 1706, and this also authorized the First Amendment to that development agreement, and that was ultimately executed and recorded. About a year or so later in May, there was a Second Amendment that was authorized to be executed, and that was ultimately recorded. And that happened in May of 2018. The recordation happened later that month at the end of May. That was also included in your backup. And so that brought us to some negotiations that began quite some time ago with Fenway staff and the city attorney's office and the folks from the hotel on the third amended development agreement. And while it's a lengthy document, there's really the meat of what we're talking about this evening are three parts to this amendment that really are what we're talking about. So, and they're found in section 19, more specifically subparagraphs H, I, and J on pages 7 and 8. And I'll briefly go over those items for you. Subparagraph H, this approves.
Forgive me, Joey. I believe because we're in transition, we're not showing up on screens.
I don't have I don't have a presentation, no.
It's my understanding from communications that since they're moving the operations over to City Hall, that they've got live stream capabilities here, but it's not televised.
I did happen to bring 2 agenda packets, if you'd like a
That's okay.
packet.
No, that's
Okay,
fine.
perfect.
So, okay, so if you don't have the benefit of the document in front of you, what I can tell you is essentially the three sections we're talking about. The first one is to allow essentially a deviation from the final design of the project to allow a monument sign in a specific location on the site. And then the design of that sign is also part of the exhibits and essentially how the sign is going to look. Real simply, the sign will be located on the northwest corner of the property, essentially at Lyndhurst and Edgewater Drive. It'll be a monument ground-mounted sign, and it'll be, you know, obviously done up as the way it shows in the exhibits, which is the Fenway design logo. That's really the first item we're talking about. The second one is from time to time, since the hotel's been open, they put up a shade tent in the pool area. This is to the rear of the structure, on the back side, if you will, near the pool. And so the second change allows for that tent it's called a shade tent, essentially to go up and down from time to time, to be installed and reinstalled, or deinstalled, I suppose, from time to time in that location as needed. And they would be able to do that essentially if this is approved. And then the third change, if you will, is allows for a major special event tent and parking plan. And so that is where, from time to time, if they have an event that involves 100 or more people, where they typically have the tent out in the front on the front side of the property, on the west side of the building, in essentially the front lawn, that they have to follow a parking plan, and they have to go through what's required in that subparagraph J on page 8, which again, I know if you don't have the document in front of you, essentially lays out, they've got an exhibit that shows you where a tent would typically be laid out, where the temporary parking, and it also puts a requirement in for off-site parking, should they, for the event. So they have to be able to handle the parking for the impact of what is considered a major special event, tent and parking plan. And so those are the 3 changes that are going to happen as a result of this amendment. Again, I think the folks, perhaps the city attorney and or the applicant, could speak in greater detail on that, but that's really a summary of it. And with that, the staff's recommendation to the LPA is that you recommend approval of Ordinance 2305 and the third amended Fenway Hotel Development Agreement to the City Commission. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions I can, and again, the applicant is here as well.
Thank you. For any of y'all that don't have this packet, are you tuned into at least the site plan as to where the shade tent is and where the pylon, not the pylon, but the little monument sign, and where the large party tent would be in the front?
Yes.
We're all tuned into that.
Yep.
We know the
Yeah.
location.
Looked at all the documentation.
Okay. Okay, since I'm vice chair here, I get to ask the first question, okay? On this shade tent, okay, and I totally understand why they would need it where it's at, and it's fine. It's kind of hidden from the neighbors and all of that. I just didn't understand. It says this is going to be a temporary. Does the approval expire in 2 years, and or a permanent? Are we giving them an approval for a permanent tent here? Because we're talking temporary for 2 years, and then does that mean they got to come back to us and ask for approval to do a permanent one?
I don't really know. That may tie to the legality of the document, and that's really outside my area.
Okay, it just sounds like to me that they're asking for this as a temporary thing. They're going to take it up and down as they need it, and this agreement is going to expire in 2 years, and then does that mean that if within that 2 years, the tent gets permanently built? And that's, I guess, my question, and I'll wait to listen to the representative of this, okay?
Do you want me to read into the record that paragraph? It's fairly short, so I can slowly read it so you understand the letter by letter, and I don't think it's legalese. I think it's fairly explanatory. So if you want me to read you that paragraph from the amendment, I can do that. Is that the board's will? You want me to do that? Okay, so it says, the city hereby approves the deviation from the final design review for purposes of providing for the construction and installation of the temporary installation, deinstallation, and reinstallation from time to time of a shade tent that is consistent with Florida Building Code standards, with the dimensions of up to 20 feet by 50 feet on the Mainsail property at the approximate location for shade tent delineated on Exhibit D, attached hereto and incorporated herein, the shade tent. The approval for the temporary installation, deinstallation, and reinstallation from time to time of the shade tent on the Mainsail property is to provide Mainsail sufficient time to design, permit, and construct a more permanent shade structure, and it will expire in 2 years from the effective date unless otherwise extended by the city manager. Mainsail agrees to remove the shade tent during high wind events. The approval for the temporary installation, deinstallation, and reinstallation from time to time of the shade tent shall satisfy any requirement to obtain a permit for the shade tent pursuant to the Land Development Code.
Okay,
So,
great. Is there any question?
Is that tent visible from any of the side streets or the front street?
Here's the site plan, Steve.
Because it's behind the building, it would
So
not
it
be
is-
visible from Edgewater. It could be potentially visible from one or two of the north or south streets.
This seems so incidental to their operations.
By the swimming pool.
Why would amendment of the operating agreement, it seems just part of their day-to-day operations? You know, the people laying out there need shade or for gathering out at the pool.
Yeah, again, I'm not sure, you know, these are probably a little more in the legal arena. There was obviously a need for both parties to put this into a legal document, that they felt comfortable what was agreed upon. You can certainly ask the gentleman from the hotel why operationally they felt this was, you know, they would be better suited to answer that than I would.
Deborah, any questions?
So, on this issue, they have 2 years, and then they would come back and go through permitting, and go through design, and go through the whole thing for a permanent structure. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so they would have, what they would have is 2 years to make a decision to decide to go either with a permanent structure.
And at that time, it would come back here,
No.
the commission? Where would it go?
Presumably, it would be a modification to this development agreement again.
So it would go here and the commission again?
If it's handled as another amendment, then it would go through the same process we're doing this evening, and we will do at the city commission moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Are we going to roll right into like the special tent and the parking? Can we start discussing that now, or did you have more introduction on those items?
No, that was it, the staff.
On that special tent, is there a specific size limit that they'll be allowed? Or the number of tents?
So the drawing does, I don't believe it gives, it may give a basic dimension, but that does not have, the way Hillary just read, there was an absolute maximum dimension there. I do not believe there's an absolute maximum dimension.
There's not.
Okay. So when they set up a special event tent, be subject to the same rules and regulation of any other business in town for a large gathering? Are they fire inspector? What are the steps that they would have to go through to set up this special event tent?
Well, they have to follow the stuff that is the information laid out in the code. Now, yes, anytime you put up a tent, temporary or otherwise, that tent gets inspected by our fire department.
So when the tent's set up, looks like it was geared towards 100-plus people, will they also be required portable toilets? Will there be other secondary things that have to be included when this tent is brought in?
you'd have to ask them if they anticipate needing that. The facility itself, my understanding, has been hosting, you've been using facilities within the hotel itself, though.
I'll hold off until they speak, because I think we're.
Yeah, I think a lot of what I'm hearing probably needs to be addressed by the folks who are going to be operating the events.
Michael?
Yep.
Jim? What was it?
Okay.
Yep, I'm good. Good. Okay, I'm sorry.
I think we need to hear from the Fenway people.
Yeah, okay. So we're all satisfied here? All right, is the representative here? And this is your moment to come before us and hopefully shed some light on some of these questions.
Hi. I'm Joe Collier. I'm the general partner for the Fenway Hotel and the ownership group. My friend Dallas behind me, and I'm the manager, or my company manages the hotel. I'll start with just a little small tent in the back. It's just a small shade structure. We've had it back there for a while, and I think if we do end up coming back with a permanent structure, then yeah, we would have to come back and go through this process and put a permanent structure. You can't see that tent. Oh, sorry. You can't see that tent from anywhere. It's because if you recall, the building is kind of a U shape, and it's back by the pool, so you can't see it from anywhere, from even the side street. So, and it's just a tiny little tent. The big tent, the Fenway, as part of our business plan, we do a lot of weddings. That's really a big part of the boutique hotels. That's how they survive, is to do weddings. We do over 100 weddings a year at Fenway. Most of the time the brides use the ballroom. Sometimes they want to do their wedding out on the front. We've been doing this now for the last couple of years. So the tents come up, they come down. The permit process for the tent was really, for the small tent back by the pool, is we were kind of driving the city crazy, like, hey, can we put this little tent up? And then, so they were like, just leave that tent up and put it in the development agreement. So that's kind of how the chronology of what was going on with the small tent in the back. And then on the front, what we really wanted to do was come up with a plan so that we weren't having to park cars on the front lawn and create anything that was unsightly there. I didn't want the cars parking on our pretty grass, and we wanted to create that nice, that whole event lawn, that look that you see at the front of the Fenway. So what we agreed, and this took some time back and forth with Jennifer and the city, was we said, we're not going to park any cars on there. We won't park anything on the front. We're kind of confined to where we can put the tent based upon the street, the driveway, the sidewalk that bifurcates the front of the front lawn. So the tents can only be a certain size anyways, and because of the size of the hotel, we can only take so many people in terms of guests. The hotel's only 83 rooms, so that's kind of what confines the tent size. 95% of the business that we do in the tent is for weddings. The bride wants to be out front, they want to see the water and
So
stuff.
is it primarily then where the wedding is conducted, or would it also flow into the reception?
It depends. Sometimes they're using one of the other venues in town, the historic venues and such, for the actual wedding ceremony. Sometimes it's the wedding reception, so it's a combination of both. I'd say it's probably half and half. Sometimes just
So
a
on
ceremony.
behalf of the neighbors there, is there music, live entertainment, and then all the noise ordinances are?
Yeah, we have to follow all the same rules. We shut everything down at the same time, just like we do for the Hi-Fi for the rooftop bar. We've been a good neighbor. We host events on the front lawn. All the neighbors come over in their golf carts. I think you'd get good feedback if you talk to our friends, the Dowists, and the neighbors in the hood there.
My golf cart's parked on that front lawn many times on
Yeah.
weekends. How about a little more clarification on this parking issue? I noticed you have some off-site parking. Is that self-parking, or is that valet off-premise, off-site?
So most of what we do is valet. I mean, you can self-park at the Fenway, but most of what we do is valet. But what the concept here is, when we apply for the tent permit, for the event permit, which we do fairly commonly, and we have been doing it, then the parking plan sort of goes in and gets engaged. And so when that occurs, that means that we have to use our off-site parking, so that we're not, because we're not allowed to, because of the way the street parking is. I don't know if you guys recall, there used to be, there's parking all the way, there's street parking all the way around the whole hotel. And so we agreed that we wouldn't be allowing those people to use all that street parking. It's resident-only parking now. The Fenway only has a very small amount of parking now around perimeter of the actual hotel. It's a smaller amount of parking. So when we do a wedding, and let's say it's a 100-person wedding, well, a bunch of the people are guests of the hotel. The majority are guests of the hotel. They all, that's the kind of business we want. We want people that are using the hotel. Let's say that 60% are hotel guests. Well, they're just walking out of the hotel and coming to the wedding. But because of the size, if it's a 100-person wedding, we have to apply, do the parking plan accordingly. So we use the off-site parking spaces that we have, which is an agreement that we have, and the city has a copy of the agreement that we have with the Taoists to use their spaces.
And again, that's self-parked, or is that valeted?
It's mostly valet, yeah.
So are there a number of the guests, though, that would be parking on those two east-west streets, or is that completely closed down?
They can't because of the resident parking. If they park on the resident parking and they're not a resident, don't have the permit, then they're going to get ticketed. Yeah.
How many parking places in toto will you be providing for this 100-person event? Understanding that, say 60%. How many is it?
It's actually called out in here, and it says.
Is it 50? I was 50. And where is your off-site? Where do you park?
Our friends the Taoists.
And they can handle the 50?
Yeah, they have a whole bunch of parking in the back behind our building. They have a big structure back there, and that's where their Taoist headquarters is.
And that's
we don't normally use
that's your structured off-site?
We don't normally use those spaces, but for special events we do.
And they agree as your partner?
Correct.
Correct. Okay, that was my questions on the parking.
Do you have any questions?
Just curious about the possibility of a permanent structure there. What might that look like, or is that something that is really possible?
In the back, you mean, or the?
No, in the front.
No, there's not going to be any permanent structures
okay.
in the front. Yeah, that's just a
Other than the
tent.
monument sign.
Yeah, there's
Right.
we're not planning any permanent structures in the front of the building. Yeah, we had gone through a historic process to restore the hotel the way it is now, so that would foul that up.
So the only permanent structure is the monument sign.
Permanent structure is a monument sign, and I brought some extra copies of that if y'all haven't seen the monument sign. It looks good. It's like the shape, and it looks like the hotel, and it's just a monument sign.
Charles, do you have any questions?
I have a question about the monument sign. I do love the design of it. I think it goes very well with the hotel building. But is it just a white lit sign, or is it a LED background or something of that nature? It's hard to tell by the drawings.
LED, but here I have some pictures of it.
It looked like maybe the lettering was going to be lit or something.
I don't think it's LED though. It's just backlit.
Backlit. That's
Yeah,
okay.
backlit.
Cool. I understand that then.
Yeah. Here's a picture of it here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the letters are just backlit.
Okay, that's what I was wondering
So
about.
you can see what it looks like at night.
Okay.
Our biggest problem, and really the main reason for the sign, a big part of it is, a lot of people don't know that we have a restaurant buried in that building. You go by and you see the hotel and you see the little Fenway up at the top of it, but we really need to let people know that we've got some outlets in the building. You want to?
Yep.
Whoops. Then let me ask you the question I tried to get from Joey. So the shade tent in the back, not that this is a big deal, so is it your plan to do a permanent? Is that where you've asked for the 2-year extension to,
Yeah.
so it eventually will be a permanent?
Yeah, it's because when you're back there, it gets hot back there because you're in a courtyard of the building, and so it's like an adobe heat situation. So we need to create a shade. We just haven't designed it, and we will, so that we don't keep doing the temporary deal. Eventually,
well,
we'll just
I-
put
you
some
know,
kind of little
I see that
gazebo
the
back there.
2-year, limit, so that's kind of what triggered that question
Yeah.
for me. Okay. Is there any other question of the representative?
I have a question on the monument sign. I'm trying to, I looked over all the, and I saw the pictures. How are you gonna, if it's right up there on, it's where the event, the special event thing, and then it's right on the corner really of Lyndhurst. So is it double-sided? I mean, how is it situated? I mean, it looked like it was
I
just.
think it got moved on one of the drawings. I mean, originally we wanted it to be sort of catty corner. Then yes, it would be. But yeah, I believe it is. So that's, yeah, it is. It is. It's got on both sides that you're seeing it on.
Yeah, because I couldn't figure out wherever you placed it, if it was sort of like that, then how are you just going to see it coming south or going north?
It needs to be like that. So if you're
Yeah.
coming down Edgewater, you're seeing it from both sides.
So it's double,
Yeah,
right?
That'll be on the south side of the property.
on the
Here it is.
north side.
But the tent is on the north side.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's there.
the tent is, but it doesn't, the tent only occupies a small compared to the whole lawn area there. This is up by the corner.
Joe, so that sign is going to parallel
It
Lyndhurst?
used to be like that. That's the way, I believe it's depicted on the drawing, but I'm not sure I have that drawing.
Now, the drawing shows it just facing.
Linear?
Facing.
Yeah, then if that's the case, then it's only one.
If I may, if you look at Exhibit D, Joe, you'll see it's actually parallel to
So
Edgewater,
then it's only gonna be one
which I
sided.
think it was probably meant to be perpendicular to Edgewater.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be like, it's meant to be depicted like that, so that it's perpendicular.
So you're really only going to see it if you're going south.
No, if it's perpendicular, then it's both sides.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that's
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it's good.
I
It's a
do
valid-
have
it's a
problems
valid
with
point.
perpendicular, but,
It needs to be, you need to be able to see it going both ways.
well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to do it,
Well, do you know, did it get changed somehow? Was that a modification that was asked?
I'm gonna be honest, these are the exhibits that we were provided.
Yeah.
That they're labeled, the one that's labeled Exhibit D shows it on the northeast corner of the property, as was mentioned, at Lyndhurst and Edgewater, but the sign is shown, it's depicted on that site plan as running parallel to Edgewater,
I think all
as
of our,
opposed to parallel to Lyndhurst.
yeah, I think all of the renderings and everything we sent in all have it perpendicular, but somehow it got put linear on the site plan. You guys have anything different with that? Okay. Yeah, so we can fix that on the site plan.
and so if it is going to be double-sided, so it does have to be lighted on both sides so that it
Correct,
goes through.
yeah. Yes, ma'am.
And then, my other question is, it's reading, I want to be sure that I'm correct with the footage. And so I think it's 5.4 feet high and 21.3 feet long. Is that correct? Or did I mess that
6
up?
feet, 6 feet tall.
It's
I was
16 feet long
16 feet,
by
okay.
s- by 6 feet at the very peak.
6 feet high.
Okay, it's
At
16.
the very peak to there, that's 6 feet,
Uh-huh.
but this is 16,
6 feet high.
Okay, so
yeah.
I didn't read it right. It's 16 feet long and it's 6 feet high.
At the peak of the little Fenway thing, it's 6.
Is the 6.
Yeah.
And
And then
that's a pretty good sized sign. Is that compliant with all sign codes?
Yes.
Any other questions? Deborah, you okay?
With the lighting for the sign, is that on all evening, or is there a certain time you turn it off?
I don't think we've really thought that through. I mean, we could probably put it on a timer, shut it off at a certain time. No need for it to be on after a certain time anyways.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my concern too. You've got that new house being built right there at Lyndhurst, and that sign will be real close to that property.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I think it's a valid point. We can put it on a timer so it shuts off.
Any other questions?
Well, you could, I guess you could down, whatever you call, where you downlight, I don't know if you could do that with a sign, so that you don't have,
It's
light
meant to-
pollution.
Yeah, it's meant to be soft lighting. I'm not a big fan of heavy, bright, I don't like pollution, et cetera, so I'm on board with making sure it's soft, it has more of a glow to it, and then we can shut it off at a certain time.
Now, we're just at advisory, and you know I have to, I know, you know, I'm new here. So, we're making the recommendation to the commission, whatever our recommendation ends up being. And then, but in this recommendation, would we say that some things were discussed about the double lighting or the lighting, were there any light pollution, the visibility of the pool, and the parking has been pretty well set out. And then the last thing was the event. We don't really have a footage for the event, do we? The event tent.
Well, like I say, it's confined. Every wedding, the tent could be really small, it could be a little bit bigger, so I don't think we're confined by the literal square footage of the lawn and the sidewalk and all that, but I don't think we're looking to have a parameter of it. The tent's got to be a 40 by 40
Is that your tent, or
tent.
you rent it
Yeah,
per event?
we rent it per event.
Yeah, I'm not trying to even make you have a direct parameter, but I'm trying to get some idea of size.
I think it's depicted with
So what's the largest it might be?
I think there was a maximum, wasn't there
Oh,
a
there's a
maximum?
maximum.
No, not for that tent.
Okay.
There's a maximum for the shade tent.
That's the
Oh,
shade
yeah,
tent.
the shade is
shade.
20 by 50.
Right.
Yeah, the
Correct.
shade tent has a maximum. I don't think we're looking to confine the size of the tent, again, because it's sort of naturally confined there. Yeah.
But I will say they have to get a permit when they do those events, and so
And that
that's
will go
subject
through
to.
the permit
Correct,
process.
and it's,
So-
yeah.
And nothing that we're doing, by the way, with this changes the business model we've already been doing for the last 2.5 years. I mean, we've been going back and forth with the city to get all this organized, and it just kind of languished during COVID, et cetera, but nothing is going to change. So what you've been seeing in terms of the activation of that front lawn, we're not going to be making any changes to that, and the neighbors are all on board with that.
Joe, maybe to bring some clarity to Deborah's question, you've got capacity, 83 rooms, roughly 100 people. It's a tent big enough to hold 100 people, which is pretty much the size tents we've seen in the front so far in the past couple of years.
That's
correct?
accurate, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Any other questions? We good?
I think I've worn myself out.
Thank
And
you,
just
Doug.
as a procedural note too, just to supplement what the applicant is saying, is that the reason this is coming before here and there's a public hearing and there will be subsequent public hearings is because it's integrated into the development agreement, and that development agreement says that there has to be an amendment if anything in that final site plan changes. So this is just coming to fruition of their business practices that they've been having, and so they want to memorialize it and do the proper thing
Sure.
and have that memorialized in the amendment. And so those tweaks to the site plan, the supplements to the site plan, have to be an amendment to the development agreement, and that's why it's before you tonight.
Yeah,
So.
this is normal for a development
Makes sense.
agreement.
Correct.
And it's again, it's driven by not trying to drive the city crazy every time we have a plan in place. Every time we got to put up a tent, they're like, oh, here comes Fenway again.
Does the documentation have to be corrected for the signage to be perpendicular to Lyndhurst? Before it goes to the city commission?
We're approving the fact that they're going to have a pylon sign. The city will be giving the permit for it, so I don't see an issue there.
I think in the interest, I think it's a great point, in the interest of just making sure it's clean, if the intent is to depict it as in a different position, then we're going to want Exhibit D just to be updated between now and our first reading of the ordinance,
And won't
just to
that
make
be
sure it's
introduced
consistent.
when it comes to a motion? That's the way we've done it in the past?
We can
Specify
add it.
those corrections?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because it is part of what was presented and noticed here tonight. So it definitely needs to be memorialized in the motion and in the board's order.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thank you guys very much.
At this time, I'll open up this agenda item for the public. Anyone from the public, you may come forward. Please state your name so that,
Can I make one procedural comment before we get started?
why don't you give us your name
My
first?
name is John Shine. I'm the president of the Dunedin Downtown Neighborhood Association. And the procedural comment I'd like to make is, on May 2nd, I made a request based on being a neighbor and being provided notice. And I asked for this development agreement. Notice shouldn't be made until the development agreement is in the hands and being able to be provided to the neighbors. I did not get that development agreement until yesterday. So as far as I'm concerned, the neighbors were not properly notified, and there has not been enough time for the neighbors to be able to consume the information and to take action on the information. With that, I'd like to begin. I'm going to start with what a tent looks like. Because what you've been told is from time to time, but what Mr. Collier told you is that you're going to have 100 wedding events every year. That's 2 a week. So when I sit in my living room and I listen to the cha-cha slide, the electric slide, the chicken dance, okay, that goes to the heart of my home and the heart of my neighbors, and I can tell you the sound is real, and there's nothing I can do about it until 11 o'clock. There is no noise ordinance until 11 o'clock, and those weddings get very loud. I don't see any reason why they couldn't have pulled a permit for this sign. Simple. They must pull permits all the time to replace air conditioners. I don't see any reason why they even pulled a permit for the shade tent, because the shade tent was put up in the middle of the night during the pandemic, and it has never come down. Okay? I made a complaint to the city, and the city did nothing about it. If you and I put anything like that, even a 10 by 10 shed in our backyards, you better believe code compliance would be out there and we would be paying fines and fees associated with that. That didn't happen here. Understand that this development agreement is an ordinance. It's legislation. So if you could avoid making an addendum, you would. But if you want something to become law, legislative, ordinance, then it's best to go through this development agreement. You don't do it for a sign, and you don't do it for a shade tent. You do it so you can have 100 events a year. You do it so that time after time, when they have a wedding, when they have a huge tent like what you're seeing here, that tent has 12 HVACs. It has a full permanent flooring. It has its own indoor plumbing, okay? That's why you do it. That tent can hold probably 500 to 1,000 people. 85% of our tourism in Dunedin comes in a car. A car. They don't stay at a hotel. They come in a car. So if you want to have a big wedding like that one, that's a tent. That's a tent that the Fenway had. If you want to have a big tent like the Fenway has, and that's how they make their money, he just told you that, you can build a huge tent. And according to this, you don't have to worry about the size, you don't worry about how many, you don't worry about how long, because none of that is in the development agreement. None of that is in the development agreement. There's not even wording associated with a permit. So this gives the Fenway license to do whatever they want in terms of special events. I'm off. I would say that there are some missing documents as well, like the special off-site parking permit. Where is that? Why is that? Why are we giving the Fenway 15 residential parking spots? They're not a resident. That's for residents. Why are we allowing the Fenway to park in a fire lane as part of their parking? What is going on? Why are we here? What is this development agreement all about? My time is up, but there's a lot more to be told about this story.
John,
and you'll see it in social
media.
media.
Let me ask you this one question. These photographs of that tent,
Yes.
are they photographs of the tent that have been on that property?
That is, it's even worse than that.
No, I just
It,
want to know
it is
what I
a
looked
property
at.
adjoining the property that the Fenway used. It had a residential permit, and the tent was positioned on that property.
Those tents are pictures of
That
the
tent would
Fenway
eas-
tents?
That tent would easily fit on the Fenway.
No. My question was, are the photographs there Fenway tents that they've used actually on their property?
It's a Fenway tent that was used, but it was illegally put on the residential lot next door. It was the first tent they put up, and it was never put up again.
Would you show me which picture that was, that specific tent?
That is the entire tent. Those are just different pictures of the tent. And I'm sorry they were so dark, but they were put up in the middle of the night up until 8 o'clock at night. We had to call the police because they exceeded the construction requirements. I'm not sure there was a permit placed for that, and I can tell you there's been many permits not pulled for tents. None of them were approved because I checked on each and every one of them. Okay? So there's been a lot of abuses at this property,
Okay,
Thank
you.
and the neighbors aren't happy about it.
Joe, did you want to respond to any of that? Just a second, Ken.
Yeah, so this tent, to his point, that he couldn't answer the question, this was the.
Joe, I meant Joey.
Oh,
Can I hear a response from
Joe or Joey?
Joe? I'm sorry.
Joe's, I don't know.
Any, a response to any of what you heard?
No, I don't have any.
Okay.
This tent was I think it was the Westinghouse family that rented that lot across the street that we don't own. We no longer own that lot. This was a very special deal. We went through the city to get this done for them.
You own it, Joe.
I do not own it.
Please.
And so this is a one-time, and we had this very discussion with Jennifer. So over the course of the last couple of years, this is precisely what we didn't want. So we don't want to have this. So that's the reason why we're memorializing this in the development agreement, is because, yes, that was a big deal. They bought out the whole hotel, and it was a famous family from around this area. I don't remember exactly the roots of the family, but we agreed to do it. And he's right, it was a big tent. I'll give him that, but we're not doing that anymore. We don't own that lot across the street anymore anyways. We own the historic cottage, and I think it's important to know that when we bought the Fenway and we partnered with the Taoists, just like to remind everybody, and the neighbors too, that it was a derelict building that was abandoned with graffiti and homeless people and people breaking in windows. That's what we came upon when we spent the $20 million to renovate and bring that hotel back to life. Now, to operate a hotel, we do have to have business. We do, it's only 83 rooms, so we need to be able to do the things to conduct business at the property to pay our bills. And boutique hotels are known for weddings. Since this event, we haven't had, and when we're talking about we book 100 weddings at the hotel every year, not every wedding does a tent. You can look and find out that the amount of times we've pulled permits, it hasn't been 100 times for permits for tents. It's only for when the bride is asked for to have something out on the front lawn. We have a ballroom at the Fenway, and so many times people use the ballroom. But it is a beautiful setting out there, and we've tried to do the concert series, things like that the neighbors like. So it's not a perfect world in the sense that you do have a commercial hotel that's located in a neighborhood. But that's the reason why we're trying to memorialize these things in a development agreement, to give everybody some satisfaction that, look, there's a plan here. We're not going to do a party for 500 people and have the whole neighborhood swarmed with cars. I live in a historic neighborhood over in Hyde Park. I know what that's like. So, I think we've been a good neighbor, and we're trying to make sure we continue to be a good neighbor. So,
I have two questions for you.
sure.
Are those guests parking on the streets downtown? I've heard they are, and I've heard they're not. So if there's no place to park, can I just find a place along the side of the street and park?
No, you have a residential permit. Now, keep in mind, we pay taxes. The hotel owns a lot of land on both sides of that street, but in dealing with the city, we said we understand with the neighbors. And so, unlike any of the other downtown businesses, I don't recall any other downtown businesses giving up all street parking all over their neighborhood. We gave up all the street parking and said, okay, we're going to have residential parking. We understand that, but we do own the property, so we are allowed to have at least a few of the parking spaces that fall along our property line. So we do have 15 spaces that fall, you know, in the Fenway's purview. But all the other parking, which is like about 50 or 60 spaces all around there, we agreed with the city on that, and they became residential spots.
Many years ago, probably, I know a couple sitting up here that'll help me out, in the 12, 15 years ago, there was a real issue in the city with amplified noise. Is there someone on site? Is there a manager on site? Just out of respect for these neighbors? You know, I happen to live downtown, and there are times where, whether it be fireworks from the stadium or the wind's just right, I don't hear the Fenway. I don't live that close, but I live close to downtown here. Is there someone that's looking out for the interest of the community? A manager on site if it gets too loud, or?
We always have a manager on duty. We always have someone that's there to run the wedding and, you know, and represent the hotel, you know, during those types of events. And we follow all of the ordinances of the city when it comes to noise and tents and everything else. We're following the rules, so we're breaking any rules that are in place, just like all the other bars and restaurants in Dunedin.
For the record.
Oh, sorry.
I have a question. So Joe, you mentioned that you rented that land for that.
We used to own that land. So when we bought the Fenway, for this very reason, we bought the historic cottage that was next to that side of the building. We bought that pink house, and it came with 2 waterfront lots in the front. We donated the lots for the arts deal, and they put up a tent, and they had a big old tent, and they did the cultural arts, and they've done other cultural events on those 2 front lots. We subsequently sold those 2 front lots to someone that I believe is trying to build a home or something over there, or maybe 2 homes. And because of the setback though in Edgewater, I don't think they've been successful being able to do anything. So the lots are still empty. We don't own them. We still own that little pink cottage, but those 2 lots up on the front where that big mammoth tent went, we don't own those anymore.
Okay, so this amendment would be just for putting a tent?
Just on the front lawn of the Fenway, yeah.
Which we've seen.
Correct, which you've seen, and we've been operating that way. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you.
This is still open for a public hearing. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward?
Do I get to respond?
Do anyone have an issue with hearing?
I have no.
We'll set the clock again for,
As Joe said, the Fenway didn't own the lots. Joe owned the lots. Okay? So that's one piece. The second is the lots was very small compared to what the front of the Fenway is. What we're simply asking you to do is put some controls in place, because the current rules and the current laws don't protect my neighborhood. Up to 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday night, playing the cha-cha slide doesn't cut it for my neighborhood. We're not downtown. We don't have buildings blocking the sound. It goes straight out through the neighborhood, straight out. Thank God there was a house put in between me and my house, because my house is one big glass back and it acts like a drum. Okay? I've asked them, called them over and over again, please at least face the music out to the water. Please. Nothing. Not a thing. I wish I had my neighbors. I wish they got better notice. I wish we really understood what the issues were with this development agreement so we could be here and speak about this. All we're asking for is a little common sense behind this development agreement. Some rules, some restrictions. You saw what a tent can be. It can be 500 to 1,000 people. You don't have to listen to him about what he wants to do, because who knows when he's going to sell that property. This development agreement lives on past Joe Collier. It lives on past Mainsail, okay? And that right of being able to build and put up a tent whenever you want, I saw nothing in the development agreement about pulling permits.
it's in there now.
I saw nothing. It isn't there now?
Well, it's part of the development agreement.
Well, is it? because I didn't see anything about it. I mean, I would love it to be that way, okay? But I can tell you their actions speak louder than anything else. And I can tell you on many, many occasions, tents weren't pulled. I don't know if it was Joe Collier.
Permits weren't pulled for the
Tent permits were not pulled. I can tell you that these tents go up on a Friday night. And I've talked to the fire marshal. There's no fire marshal inspections. He doesn't work but Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Okay? So you can't tell me you put a tent up on Friday night and somebody inspects it. It doesn't happen. You can't tell me, hey, we park on the street, but there's ticketing. We know there's no ticketing. There's no parking enforcement. Okay? That doesn't happen. This is Dunedin. I've said enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Joey, so when the Fenway decides to have a wedding, and after this whole thing gets approved or rejected, and they come and want to put up a tent there, they're going to come for a permit for that tent?
Yes.
Every time that they have, going forward, every time they want to put a tent up, they got to come to the city and get
Yeah, and it's not just them. You put up a tent, you have to get a permit. Yeah.
And didn't I see it was a certain amount of lead time? Was it 10 days?
Is it 10 days for?
Lead time to get a tent permit? You can't just.
I mean, my experience has been, quite honestly, that folks know about these events well in advance. People book weddings months out, so they oftentimes apply in advance, well in advance, but there's no drop dead date, so to speak. I mean, we can turn a tent permit around relatively quickly. We certainly recommend people apply early.
Inside our packet, it had a list of names and addresses of people that were notified. Not to jump on one of the statements he said. In those mailings, was the development agreement, or what did those people all receive, those 2 pages of addresses?
So it's called a letter of notice. It was included. So the backup you were provided for the letter of notice, or for the notification, it's a letter of notice. It describes the hearings that are going to be taking place, what the request is, property information such as the size and usually land use and zoning, owner's name, all that legalese, if you will, a map exhibit identifying the property, and letting you know what the request, letting the people within 500 feet know what the request is, and then they can contact us. I can tell you, I was visited by a gentleman who lived in the neighborhood last Thursday, and he came in because he received the letter and asked to discuss it, and so I went over it with him. We let people know that they can contact us to find out anything more. That's really the whole point of the letter of notice.
So
that was done.
So it's done. The permit.
Yeah, it was done. I will say this, just for the record, because the first and second reading of this ordinance will be taking place in the new city hall. We've changed venues because we're obviously going to be starting to meet. We are going to renotice it for the new location. So there's going to be a new letter of notice going out, changing not the dates and the elements, but it will be changing, letting people know that those 2 hearings will take place at 737 Loudon Avenue. Because we want people to know where the meetings are going to take place, and the property will get reposted, and the ads will go in the paper again to show people that the meeting's happening there, because we'll be out of this building by then.
So I don't mean to be laboring this point, but when the Fenway comes to you and says we have on a permit for a tent, somebody's going to pull out this site plan that is part of the development agreement, and they're going to make sure that it's going to fall within the parameters that are shown on the exhibit document that's provided.
So every one of the Fenway tent permit applications come in, actually get reviewed by our office, typically actually get reviewed by the city manager's office as well.
So we're not going to see the tents moving across the lawn or across that sidewalk or anything?
Each application will be reviewed against the development agreement.
Thank you.
If and when it's approved. I mean, I'm not making any presumptions.
I understand.
I will also point out a couple things. As far as noise goes, there is no, I heard a statement, and I just want to be clear, that there is no noise ordinance till 11 o'clock. That's not true. There is still a noise ordinance, that's always in place. So we always encourage that if there's, and this applies to anybody, if there's a belief that there's a noise violation, then they contact the sheriff's office anytime.
So there is a limit
That's
to
correct.
noise.
Yeah, there's a noise parameter,
Even if it occurs
there's a threshold,
before-
yes. So we would certainly want to make sure that if anybody, regardless, I'm not talking just about the Fenway, if anybody believes there's a noise violation, that's, the city obviously contracts with the sheriff's office, and they do that, they enforce our noise ordinance.
And isn't it no amplified music after 11? I think that's.
It's actually, it's a sound,
Point of
sound decibels, yeah. So, again, I'm just pointing out that not just for this case, we would encourage anybody, after hours, or in the evening, or whatever, that if they believe there's a violation, that they can contact the sheriff's office. So,
But Joe, just to confirm what he said, it's 65 decibels at the Fenway property line would be code, and no amplified music after 11 o'clock is the current noise.
I don't have the ordinance here in
I
front of me.
have it in front of
Kevin,
me.
but, so
That
maybe.
is correct.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I can read it if you want, but that's generally, what you've just said is correct.
At the point of complaint or at the property line? I thought if it was like, if I was calling for my house, it would have to be 65 decibels at my house.
It's a weighted decibel threshold, so measured at the property line of the complainant. Correct.
At the property
Or
line
which-
of the complainant.
Of the complainant, yes.
Okay, so now.
Or which otherwise creates a nuisance.
Or
So
which-
it does say.
So for John to complain, it would have to be 65 decibels at his property.
Line.
Measured
Would be a
at
problem.
his property line,
Okay.
yes.
Correct. It has to be an official meter reading,
Correct.
but our conversation here is average 60 decibels on my meter. I live downtown, so I keep an eye on the noises.
Before I close the public meeting, are there any other questions of Joe on this issue? Any other? Last time, last call. Okay, public meeting is closed. Okay, this is time for some conversation between us board members. And who'd like to start? Deborah, do you want to start?
I knew that was coming.
Well, I can start over here.
You know, I've really been thinking about this as we've been going along, and see, I do remember the Fenway when it was falling in on itself, and I do remember vagrants, and I do remember, you know, and I think, and of course, you know, I'll put it on the record, you know, I love historic preservation. Yes, I do. So, you know, I do believe that, you know, it's a balance, and I get that. And but I think about the Renaissance Vinoy and the Old Northeast. You know, I think about that there are other neighborhoods that somehow they work the balance. It is a balance. I mean, they renovated it, they made it beautiful. Now they've got to keep it going because, you know, they've got to have business. And then the neighbors, you know, deserve peace and they deserve to enjoy their property. It's a delicate balance. But, you know, I think that I've always really appreciated good neighbors. And instead of being upset with each other, maybe there's more need for the neighbors, for you all to talk. That's all I'm going to say. I'm a neighbor too, you know, but I'm a block down the street. All I hear is the sunset things, and it really makes me happy because I'm out there celebrating sunset myself, you know, on my porch. But, you know, keep talking to each other. But it's a delicate balance, and I think what we're doing, instead of going ahead and having issues, we are memorializing how things are supposed to be. We're creating parameters. And I think parameters are better than no parameters, always, because then we have a guiding light. So, you know, I'm going to vote for this. I think that you need to look at the monument sign and get that tweaked out so that how that's really going to work. And, you know, the noise ordinance, it's been around a long time, and it either makes people happy or it drives them crazy. But that we do have a noise ordinance and it works. And so, you know, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
I've lived here for 40 years, and Joe, I do recall when it was an eyesore. And I've sat up here for many years, and it's come before us many times, and I'm a strong supporter. But I also live, not as close as this gentleman, but I also live downtown, and we do frequent it. We do eat at the restaurant. We do go up on weekends and enjoy how beautiful it is down there. And I fully support and thank everything you've done for the city, but we got to be respectful to these neighbors and make sure that this is done right. So I've seen it many times. I've lived here a long time, and I think it's a beautiful piece of property, and hope for the best.
Michael?
My concerns really have to do with your accusations that they have broken the law. And this is not a body that can deal with that. So I would suggest that you do whatever the law says you need to do if the laws have been broken. Other than that, I can't see where you have a leg to stand on, sir. I do support Deborah's suggestion that then the hotel have more conversation about how you can be sure that the letter of the law is met.
Charles?
Listening to Deborah talk about conversation between homeowners and the hotel, I also have to agree, and maybe the hotel listen maybe a little bit more from you and your group, that if a placement of the band or the tent could direct the noise in it out to sea rather than towards the neighbors, might help a great deal. And these are, to me, a small thing that can be repaired, and if that can be done, it may very well help the group to be able to enjoy and love the hotel more than what they do right now. To me, that would be a very simple thing to fix. I think it's all about compromise. We live in a beautiful city. Our city has grown tremendously over the last 20 years. And all of us deal with a little noise here or a little unfortunate parking situation there, but it's still a great city, and I think all of the things that they've done to improve the city at the Fenway is marvelous, and I'm going to vote for this.
You do not have to, just because I'm putting you all on the spot.
Oh, no, that's
If you have nothing to
I
say,
always
that's
have
not a
some-
big deal, but here's your opportunity, okay? But I just didn't want to make you feel like you're obligated.
I'd just
do
like to
that.
reiterate that the exhibit for the sign be corrected and that there be at least a footnote about a timer so that in addition to the concerns about noise, you don't start getting concerns about light.
Good.
I am in agreement with Deborah. I think the Fenway is an asset to this city. I think it's a gem. It's where I stayed when I fell in love with this town before I moved here 4 years ago. That being said, I'm also on the Business Resident City Committee as a resident, so deal with the noise issues we have downtown. I live right at Victoria Place condominiums right there. And so I can understand where John's coming from. And I would, we can try to force each other to stay within our noise ordinances, by calling the sheriff's department. But the best conformance is always going to be if we create a culture of we respect each other's needs. We want the businesses to be successful. That's what supports a lot of the great lifestyle we have as residents here. At the same time, residents do want to be able to sleep at night. They want enjoyment of their property. So things such as looking at, can we point the speakers toward the water to mitigate some of that noise? A tent does not muffle noise waves much. It's going to go right through there. Consider, are there any other noise mitigation steps? Maybe some landscaping or something on the sides of the property that might help buffer some of that noise. But I think that's how we're really going to be successful long-term culturally. But I'm in support of this. I think it's an important part of what we need in the city, because we do have a dearth of venue spaces for weddings and so forth.
Thank you, Kevin. So this is the third time this project, and this is a development agreement project, okay? We don't have too many of these within our city, but when we do have them, they normally are very big projects. And we sit down with the city and the developer, and we come to terms. We have a legal document that specifies what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, etc. Okay, so, and every time this occurs, people are notified, okay? We're aware of what's going on. So we have an opportunity to, you know, if we've got an objection or an issue, we have an opportunity to say something. So this is the third time this development agreement has come before us, okay, and before the community. So I think development agreements are great, especially when you have a major project like the Fenway. So again, this is the third time this has come before us. The neighbors out there, you've had opportunities to always voice your opinions. You'll have that opportunity again at the commission meeting. So if you want to rally your neighbors, that's, you know, purely up to you. But I've always looked at the Fenway as a marvelous restoration, architectural restoration within our city of a landmark of long ago that has been rejuvenated and become a major part of our city. So it is a great project, and it would be even better if we would, or you all with the Fenway and you all with your neighborhood group can get together, just like the recommendation that you all have made here. You've heard us all talk, okay? That's all I have to say at this point. I'll accept a motion, and this motion can approve or deny, and or it can add, if it's an approval, it can add things that we felt, that we conversed about, that we want to make sure that the commission hears what we're saying, okay? So this is the time. If we're going to make a motion and you want something in this motion that you've heard that you feel like maybe needs to be done, needs to be, you know, we need to relocate that sign to make it on the site plan, to make it part of the legal documents, the noise issue. So this is the time to put all those little things that you've mentioned into that motion, and that motion then goes to the commission. And they either say, it's great, we want all those attachments to that motion, or they say, no, that's okay, you know, it's up to them. So I'll entertain a motion for ordinance 23-05.
But before we do, Hillary, maybe we need, as we make this motion, we need to be specific about the movement or the positioning of that sign. Shouldn't that be addressed in the motion rather than just the whole ordinance?
Yes, I would say is the motion could be relative to whether or not you're approving or denying the third amendment to the Fenway Hotel Development Agreement. That is the subject of that ordinance. And when you do so, you can make that conditioned upon or subject to changes to what is Exhibit D relative to the monument signs placement, as discussed here tonight. So you can say that. So if that's what the board desires.
It was Exhibit D?
It is in Exhibit D, that's correct. And it's the freestanding monument sign in the placement. And I believe, Joey, correct me if I'm wrong, you said it was, in the current plans, it says it's supposed to be, it's parallel, but it should be, in fact, perpendicular. Is that right, Jim? Okay. So if you want to be that specific, but just, okay.
Okay. So I'll try this, and if I need to be corrected, please don't hesitate.
I'm here to help.
I'd like to make a motion for acceptance of ordinance 23-05, including Exhibit D, installation of the monument sign perpendicular to Edgewater.
So what I would do is make a motion, to either approve or deny the third amendment as reflected in that ordinance, and then you could say subject to or conditioned upon changes to Exhibit D, and then describe those. So,
I thought that's what I said.
Yeah.
is it what you said? I'm sorry, Michelle, help me, you know,
You
so.
said acceptance instead
Yeah.
of approval.
Yeah, so, and again, I would just use verbiage to the effect of subject to or conditioned upon, or, you know, clarifying that Exhibit D is to be replaced or revised, you know, so.
Do you even have to mention the exact exhibit? Can we not say that the sign be
You can say,
be
yes,
properly
you can say.
identified on the exhibit?
Correct. You can say, you just, yes, as long as it's well described in the motion and the recommendation to the board, I'm sure the commission will pick up what you're putting down.
You can do
And
it.
whether it's double-sided. I mean, you know.
I have to agree with her. I mean,
Okay.
that it's done very specific.
And the light, if there's a way to cure the
Because I
light.
think we're going to get one bite at this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I
Your
mean,
motion is rendered as an order of this body, but it will be heard twice at 2 public hearings by the commission for final decision. But yes, if you're only concerned about the sign, then the motion could stand. But if you're also concerned about the lighting on the sign, that the motion may need to be amended.
Well, you can amend.
Can I ask a question? Is it possible to put something in there, you know, reflective to the noise ordinance that, you know, this is subject to review and repeal for X number of noise violations, ticketed noise violations or something? Is that possible?
I don't know that we can step over and,
Or, I don't-
Yeah.
So the recommendation can be conditioned. There have been orders that were conditioned, but that will ultimately be a decision for the commission. Typically, when you do that, that's a restrictive covenant, and that's going to be a legal document that would need to be considered. So it's difficult to memorialize that in a motion recommendation. But can you condition it? You can condition it. So, but again, it's a recommendation to the commission, so the commission's going to ultimately make that decision.
I'll try this again. I'd like to make a motion for acceptance, ordinance 23-05, including Exhibit D, proper lighting and positioning of the monumental sign.
I think that part's pretty good.
I'm not asking you to second it, but I'm,
No.
You're saying that you would want Exhibit D revised to reflect those things.
that's what I'm trying to say.
those issues, or clarified those issues.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add to that amendment about anything else other than the sign?
No, that's where my amendment would stop right there, or my motion to accept.
Okay. Is there a
Can I make
second?
an amendment to an amendment?
You may.
Well, I'm just wondering, I mean, I thought it was an excellent idea, and I don't even know if you can do it. I don't know if you can push sound out. I don't know that. But I thought it was an interesting concept. It was an interesting thing that might want to be considered. I mean, we're not saying that if you can't do it, we're going to, you see what I mean? I thought that was an interesting comment.
What part of that?
It's like, can you push, when you have a tent,
Oh,
can you
You're right.
push the sound more toward the sound?
I think
I don't know,
I think the sound thing can be part of that amendment. We
So
can
that's-
add, you know,
if you're, I mean, can they look at it? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can do it.
I guess by the parliamentary procedures, would I have to withdraw my,
no, just
Oh,
add
no,
to
no,
it,
no.
just add,
If you don't want to, you can say, I don't like your amendment.
It depends on who's making the motion. So if you're going to amend your own motion, that's fine. If you'd like to withdraw it and have someone else make a new motion, that just depends on how you want to proceed.
I'll stand by the motion that I made.
is there a second to that motion?
I'll second them.
We have a motion to accept with subject to the sign being identified properly within the documents. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Oh, no, aye.
The motion passes.
I got it.
The motion passes unanimously. Now, everything that we have said here about the noise thing and everything is all recorded. The commission people always listen to these recordings. The noise thing, they heard it, okay? So they heard our amendment. They know where we're coming from. So I think, and they've heard the neighbors. So thank you very much. Okay? Okay. Second, third item on this is open discussion, open forum.
I'll go first.
I'm looking forward to our orientation. I thought that was a really excellent idea. You know, the law changes so rapidly, even in sunshine. It's always good to have that refresher, and so I certainly don't understand the parameters and everything of the LPA. I'm looking forward to that.
And just as George said earlier, now that we're settled into the building, we can start that up again. You know, our move obviously has taken some time, but we have the ability to do that again and get people back engaged, get some folks rescheduled, and get new people in here.
And it just makes so much sense. If we're here for a meeting, we're all gathered. We're not spending another day during the month, you know, coming to, you know, a session of learning something. So if it is part of the agenda, we're all learning something, hopefully, every time we have a meeting.
I have to say that the orientation that the staff did for me was excellent.
Good.
And there was a PowerPoint that was associated with it. And so I think maybe as an interim step, you could provide that to the rest of the board members, a copy of that PowerPoint.
I would agree. It was very good. And also an email came out a few weeks ago about the sunshine laws and a course about that. And I did take that online, and it was quite interesting and very informative.
So when we do this open forum, it gives us a chance to get their undivided attention. And it's normally, if you've ever watched it, we always bring up things around town. I've noticed the dismantling of a building. Douglas and Skinner would be on the northeast quadrant. I think it was an auto repair shop. What's going in there?
Yeah.
Douglas and Skinner.
Be like straight across from the Woodwright Brewery, across Skinner.
Honestly, I don't know off the top of my head. No, I don't. You're seeing a dismantling of a building? You mean it's being demolished?
Yeah,
or
it
renovated?
seems like it's a part.
Yeah, that building's coming down. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And actually, it's a good thing. That was kind of an eyesore.
I think what you're talking about is maybe an older metal building? that's
Yes,
there?
yes,
Yeah,
correct.
I think that's just a demolition at this point, so I don't know what the future plans are. Not off the top of my head, I don't, I'm sorry.
Okay, when I read the notes of our last meeting, I asked you this before, and I know it's been a number of years we've been working on it. The Gateway, any projected start dates on that?
No, we don't. You know, the developer is working hard on making the project, you know, come to fruition. I mean, there's a lot of struggles in the economy, and so I would stay tuned on that.
Is there any time constraints right now with permitting? Is there?
No. The permits are approved and waiting pickup. So the city is prepared to issue them when they're paid for.
So I had.
Is there an expiration date on those, or are those open-ended?
So applications, it's interesting that question came up. And so an application where an applicant is working diligently on this is in the Florida Building Code. When you're working diligently to bring a project to fruition, that application can be extended it's like 90-day intervals. You request that of the building official, and I'm the building official, so we extend those. So
Okay.
we'll keep those permits active. Obviously, we're not going to let them expire. So.
And that's a project also under a development agreement that does have some terminology in there about time.
Yes.
I mean, at different stages. So there is a time factor involved in that project, and it's part of that development agreement.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Any questions of anything anyone has to bring up? This is when you have the staff, so last chance. Okay. So I see now on the agenda that we now open this to public hearing, okay? So, because we've decided to have this,
Oh, to clarify, just for public input, so if there was public comment on something that wasn't on the agenda, so.
Public input is for anything that was not
Okay.
agendized.
so I need to identify, this is the time to come up, this is the public hearing portion of this forum. And I see no one coming forward, so I'll close the public portion of this item. I'll entertain a motion for,
And
I move we adjourn.
I
Vice Chair,
second.
if I may just remind everyone, the next meeting, the June 14th meeting, is slated to be held at the new City Hall.
so we have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
June 14th.
I didn't hear a
Oh,
second.
I was second.
Okay.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.